Now, what we do is very much all about living. We provide a range of services for patients with cancer, and we also provide support for their family members. The charity was originally set up based on data collected from patients over a 3-year period. Now, that sounds rather straightforward, but it wasn't straightforward. How it came about was my background was nurse education. And one of the things I was responsible for was lecturing at the Isle of Man at Nobles Hospital. And on one occasion, I got what I thought was the directory out of my cupboard to check the flights for the Isle of Man. And what I had taken out was the Thomson directory. I opened it at random, and at the top of that directory, there was a title saying Cancer Aid Listening Line. And being the type of person I am, I phoned them up to find out who they were and what they were doing. And the result of that was I joined their meetings once a month. And those meetings were held for patients. And that was the beginning of my journey, because I didn't like what I heard at those meetings. We all know that patients, when they're in hospital, they do praise the nurses and they do praise the doctors, and rightly so, but you do get some where their experience has not been very good. Eventually, a self-help group started on the Wirral. I joined them as a layperson, not as a nurse, not as an educator, but simply as a layperson. And by joining them over a 3-year period, I collected the range of problems that patients were basically telling us about. And these problems, many of them were preventable. The problems that were identified were lack of emotional psychological support, which we heard earlier on this morning, that you treat the patient, but and I think Beata mentioned it, the importance of psychological support. Insufficient information about their diagnosis. Some of it was wrapped up in jargon and patients didn't understand what it was about. Little to no information about ongoing treatment. Patients being unaware that she could actually participate in their care and decide on what treatment was right for them. The lack of education on how to self-care when they were discharged. And a typical one which we came across again and again was patients who had radiotherapy treatment. And although they were told they must not wash the area, no one told them for how long. And that, of course, was quite distressing for patients, thinking they were going to go around all the time and couldn't wash a particular part of their body. And also there was no information on external support organisations, which patients were asking for. So the only way to deal with it was basically to be proactive. Now, bearing in mind I was employed by a National Health Service organisation, and what I did was the 3 years that we collected the information, we collated it, produced a report, had the report written, had a cover letter put together, and that was sent to the District General Manager. I had gone off to London, but I made sure it went. And that letter actually stated, I want you to take this report to your management committee. If you do not take this report, I will target them one by one. I come back from London at 10 o'clock at night, and my husband said to me, you've got a meeting with the director tomorrow morning. I immediately thought, there you go, he's sacked. But I wasn't sacked, he accepted our findings. But the response then was, what do you want us to do about it? There's absolutely no money. That really wasn't quite good enough. So under the cover of the Royal College of Nursing, we organised a conference. We brought the best speakers in, and we invited the District General Manager to chair the meeting. So we had a captive audience. At the end of that meeting, the district general manager went out and spoke to the Cancer Research and Polio company, which was based on Clatterbridge Hospital on the Wirral. He found the money. So I then moved sideways out of nurse education, and believe it or not, I got a role which a nurse has never ever had. And I was appointed as Assistant Director of Medical Health. It didn't last long, but it was just a title to help me move. And then what happened after that? With the help of the Health Authority, we worked in partnership to set up a charity. We also had the charity registered as a company, which allowed us to do some things a charity can't do, and using the title of a company allowed us to do the opposite. So we had a dual throng that we were able to do some things with one arm and some things with the other arm. So what happened next? I was given one room at Clatterbridge Hospital, not in the oncology unit, but in a health promotion unit. And I remember thinking, what in heaven's name are you doing here? I've got a desk, a filing cabinet, a phone, and no idea where I was going. And I looked at it with my educational hat on and thought, well, how do you stop some of the problems occurring? I thought the easiest way, I believed, was start to train some healthcare professionals. And one of the things we did was we organised training courses on communication, in the belief that if healthcare professionals listened more actively to what patients actually said to them, then they might stop some of the problems. We also put courses on stress management, again working on a very, very basic principle, that if healthcare professionals recognise stress in themselves, with a bit of luck they might recognise it in their patients and take some action. So that one room at Clatterbridge Hospital didn't stay long. We then moved to a community hospital called St Catherine's Hospital in Birkenhead. I was given one room there again. And I always said to the district general manager years ago, I'm sure you got the money for 1 year, gave me a room and thought I'd go away. That didn't work. So we had the one room at this community hospital. Within a matter of weeks, I borrowed another room. Never ever gave them it back. But what we did do, we set up a telephone helpline. And the rationale for that telephone helpline was to see if we could reproduce the problems what we had identified over the 3-year period, just in case we got it all wrong. No, we hadn't got it all wrong. We did get the telephone calls, and we had a team of district nurses who volunteered to come in their breaks to manage that telephone helpline. So with the telephone helpline up and running, we decided to do a drop-in facility 1 day a week. That 1 day a week was a Monday. Nobody came in on Monday. So we said, well, if nobody's coming, we may as well say we're here Monday to Friday. They definitely come on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it looks as though the Monday is getting children back to school, organising their life, and being more available. But what we also noticed was men used the telephone helpline less than the women, but they used the drop-in facility more than the women. Now, I don't know about your house, but if the telephone rings, I can only talk at my own house. My husband shouts phone. So I don't know if that's got something to do with it. So at St Catherine's Hospital, we moved to the next stage. On the telephone helpline, one lady actually phoned and asked where to buy organic pulses. I hadn't a clue. I knew nothing about organic food at that point. But one of the nurses phoned round health food shops to find out where she could actually buy them. And on that telephone helpline, she spoke to a wonderful lady whose personality came down the phone. And she came in to see us. And that lady was a healer, but she also taught meditation. She volunteered her services. Not only did she volunteer her services, she went out and gathered other complementary therapists. So we had an osteopath, we had a teacher in meditation, we had an aromatherapist, a reflexologist, and we weren't treating patients at that time. So we started putting on an open afternoon and advertised it in the local press. And people came to find out what complementary therapy could or could not do. Those open afternoons were packed solid. We couldn't believe how many people came. And these were patients with cancer. They wanted to know what they could do to help themselves. So we then set up a system, if you call it a system. We still had 2 rooms, one my office, one a telephone helpline, which was a very small room. We borrowed rooms then. When anyone out of their offices, we asked if we could borrow their room. We moved the furniture, we moved the filing cabinets, we moved the desks, we put up portable treatment couches, and we started treating patients with what they actually wanted. At the end of the day, we put all the furniture back again. And this went on for a few years until we got a bit fed up with it. So we put in a bid for an old disused ward at St. Catherine's Hospital. Problem was, we had no money. But I've always said, we've never let money guide us. So with no money, we held this ward for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, the manager of the community said someone else wanted the ward. Well, there was no way we were letting that ward go. So what we decided to do was we spoke to the architect and said to the architect, we want the renovations to start. My secretary at that time says, what are you going to do? You have no money. I work on a simple principle. It'll come. And it came by going knocking on the health service door and saying, I want an interest-free loan. We got 50% of what was needed. The team raised the rest. So we renovated that ward. And the team, believe it or not, we went down to a local place for curtain material. We cut the curtains up, we shared them around the team. They took them home and made curtains so we had something on the windows. We spoke to the architect, we did not waste money. Where they said we needed a new door, I went around with a measuring tape with others and said, no, we can move that door there and move that one back. And this was basically how we went on. They said they would have to take down walls because there was windows in it. We said, no, you don't. You get a bit of plasterboard, you fill that window in and you skim it. Because we didn't have a lot of money and we were not going to, lose resources on wasting it. So St. Catherine's Hospital, we were there for 17 years. 8 years ago, practice 8.5 years ago, we found out by chance they were going to pull our unit down. We weren't happy about that because we had a lease at that time. So we put a big notice up on the building saying, are you aware this building's going to be razed to the ground? Health Authority weren't happy with us, but then they didn't tell us. So we had meeting after meeting with the Health Authority. We had rights, and we knew what our rights were, but we also made sure we were correct. And one of our trustees was a lawyer who spoke to a lawyer in commercial law in Liverpool. So we went over and said, yes, you have these rights. This is what you're entitled to. They had to find us alternative accommodation. They insulted the charity. They offered us a place in the community centre, which was not appropriate for people who were ill. They then offered us another building a few miles away. It was a social services building, which was falling apart. But we were clever. We got the patients to write the reports. We got the patients to do the research on it and tell us what they thought about what we've been offered. We still didn't have a plan, but then we never really had a plan. After that, one of my friends said to me, why don't you speak to, and it happens to be my friend's son, who was a property developer. So we asked him, and he didn't live nearby, but he came over to the Wirral. I went round in his car, and we looked at lots of different buildings. In fact, he looked at them before I was even out the car. He would go in and say, don't touch that, it's got this wrong with it, that wrong with it, until the accommodation we eventually took on board. Now, this place was advertised as a 4 4-bedroom house. When we looked at the plans online, it was not a 4-bedroom house. It was a house that had been built by an architect and it had been extended. So we went, and I'll say again, we had no money this time again. So we put in an offer for the property, provided they took it off the market. My secretary at that time thought I was kidding. But then we wrote to a variety of grant-making organisations. And believe it or not, one of them come up trumps. But what happened was, they contacted us and said they would like to see around the property. Now, this property needed a lot of renovation. In fact, it needed £200,000 worth of renovation to make it suitable for patients. They came, they looked at it, walked away. 24 hours later, I was in Euro Disney with my grandchildren. I got a telephone call from my secretary to say, you need to phone Steve Morgan. And Steve Morgan owns Redwood Houses. He phoned me to say they had a meeting. What I found out later, it was the meeting they held in the car on the way back to their offices, and decided they would give us what was left in the melting pot. And I just said, thank you, no idea what he was talking about. And he said, does £90,000 suit you? What do you answer to that? Except thank you. His response was, are you going to celebrate now? And I said, I don't have enough euros. And his comment was, borrow them. So he promised us £90,000. Another organisation we wrote to gave us £50,000. And again, the team raised the rest. Now, prior to all that money being raised, we had another architect, and his wife is present with us today. He's one of our nurses. He done all the plans for us for the renovation because it was a house, and it also had a separate building which was a garage which was falling apart. He designed the interior of that building for us, changed everything in the present building, and we said to the architect, great, look at that. The builder comes along and said, when can I start? This is before I had the money. And I said, we've no money. And he kept saying, don't worry. I said, I'm serious, we don't have any money. His comment was, don't worry, Dorothy. I said, well, if you're going to worry, fine, start next week. By the time that building work was complete 3 months later, we had the money. And that's why it's important never to let money be the guiding factor. So where we are now is called Solas, Ashburton Road. We have 12 therapy rooms. We have some offices. 4 years ago, we built on an additional room. And that was another organisation in London, which was thanks to one of our patrons, who said, you need to go down to London. You've got 2 minutes to explain what you do. And she's telling me on the train down, don't forget to talk about this and don't forget to talk about that. And they were an organisation called ICAP, one of the largest dealerships in the world. And they hold a charity day once a year. It's worth you who are in charity knowing about this. They run a charity event once a year, and it's in December. And every penny they make, every dealer who makes money is not allowed to claim it. It goes into a melting pot. Now, this happens in every country of the world where they've got dealers, so that charities in China, different parts of Asia, we all gain. One of our patrons went with us. Those of you will know of him, and that is Jerry Marsden. Jerry Marsden went down to London with us, a fantastic ambassador. He even sang on a karaoke machine, which is quite amazing. But we come back home. We had no idea whether we were going to get any money or not. They asked us how much we would like. We said 46,000, which would give us a new build. They gave us 86,000. That allowed us the new build, allowed us to renovate a lot of dangerous pathways around the building. It also gave us a little bit of money to help towards a nurse's salary. You can say, why did I bother data collecting in the first place? Very simply, I was angry. I was angry on behalf of patients. I was angry they were not getting the care they should be getting. I was angry that no one was listening to them because they weren't asking for a lot. They were asking for simple things. And if anger is what drives the person for help, then it does. Also, the acceptance of the district general manager and the management board, I know why they accepted it. Sadly, his first wife died of cancer. And he actually came to the cancer self-help group that I was involved with, although I personally did not deal with him. But he knew there was nothing within the NHS that could help him when his wife died. And we know that's why he went out and got the money. And it's a sad reflection that he had to feel pain to be able to achieve for the charity. The evolution of the charity, as I said, we set up in one room. You have courage to borrow rooms and not give them back. Our open afternoons, we borrowed also a well women clinic. And fortunately, the doctor who ran that became on our board because we wanted people to be more aware of what help was there, because by then we were up and running. Still borrowing rooms, still borrowing furniture. And in fact, when we moved to the renovated ward, what I had to stop our team doing was moving furniture. To say you don't move it any longer, it stays in that room. We also looked at getting healthcare professionals to look at what we were doing, because we run a variety of therapies. One of the therapies that we've run, and we have said from day one, is the importance of nutritional therapy. Now, as a result of us doing nutritional therapy, we had a young man who came to us, and this is a bit about the Gerson therapy. We had a young man who was going to Leatherhead, and when he came to us, I had said to him, would you like us to go with you so I could learn more, because I didn't know anything about it. Unfortunately, the meeting at Leatherhead was cancelled. And this young man, together with his wife, came back to the centre and said, you said you would go with us. And I said, yes, I did. And they kindly told me I was booked on a flight to Mexico. And then I had to tell my family that one. Now, as a result of that young man, he has left an amazing legacy, because his family raised money and it sent myself and a doctor out to San Diego to do the training. And then they sent another one of our nurses who's present to Phoenix in Arizona to do the training. So that legacy still goes on in our centre. And very recently this year, another nurse who's with us today went out to San Diego. And that was supported by Together Against Cancer, so thank you for that. Because it now means, you know, we've increased our team of nurses with knowledge. But as a result of that young man, me personally put on my nursing education hat and looked at, we have got to spread the word, not just about Gerson therapy, but about nutrition and nutritional detoxification therapy. So with the help of a senior lecturer from North East Wales Institute of Higher Education, which is linked to Cardiff University, a course was designed on nutritional detoxification. We had that course accepted and accredited as part of the BSc in nursing course. And I thought that was the way forward, get more people aware of what nutritional detoxification can do to help people. We did not use the title Gerson therapy, but it was on a similar principle. Right, so how do people get to us? Telephone helpline, which is self-refer, although people can refer them, provided they've asked the patient's permission. We will not take anyone unless the patient's given permission. People use the drop-in facility. We also take direct referrals from a healthcare professional, again, provided that patient is aware. And we take referrals by family members or others, because sometimes it's a friend that phones up to tell us. We have a special model of care which we've designed. And this is important because now we are actually an NHS provider, and we worked hard to achieve that. When someone makes contact with us, within a 7-day period, and that is our strict standard, They will be seen by one of our nurses unless the patient decides otherwise. They may decide they want to finish the radiotherapy, chemotherapy, or they want to go on holiday first. We record all that. But when they're seen by a nurse will spend at least 1 hour actively listening to what the patient is saying they want help with. We are non-prescriptive. We do not tell them what they should do. We listen actively to what they're saying. At the end of that, the patient is given a letter together with a medical questionnaire to take back to their doctor. And that letter actually says, we're not asking the doctor for permission. We want further information from that doctor before we prescribe a plan of care. And the information we ask is the actual diagnosis. Also, does the patient have any other condition? For example, if they're an epileptic or something like that, we need to know before any of our therapies are prescribed for patients. When we get that medical questionnaire back from GPs, and we do get them back, we do not get doctors saying, no, they will not fill them in. In all the years since we've been doing it, we also ask a question. If the doctor says on the questionnaire, no, the patient cannot have a complementary therapy, we ask a question, why? If they can't come up with an answer, and we've got all the results, because we ask for results as well about the patient's health. We then will plan a 3-month plan of care for the patient based on what the patient is asking. So whether it's nutrition, whether they want healing, reflexology, that is the patient's choice. Very recently, in the last year, we now have the patient write consent that this is what they want. Now, this is for us to comply with the NHS. We may as well comply with them because it doesn't affect us and what we do. The patient has a named therapist who carries out the therapy. Every time the patient comes into the centre, there is a qualified nurse on the floor who will meet the patient, check how things are, and it may be about providing support for family members. Once they've had their full 3 months plan of care, a reassessment appointment will be made. Now, bearing in mind they will have been seen by a nurse every time they come in, but this is a specific appointment with a nurse on a one-to-one basis again. See how the patient's getting on. We measure outcomes, and the outcomes are measured on what we call user-friendly questionnaires. They fill a questionnaire when they come into us. They complete one after they've had a therapy. They don't have to put their name on it. This isn't about judging people. It's about us doing an internal audit. How are we doing? And whether there's anything else we need to do. If necessary, if the patient feels they need a bit more therapies or a different therapy, that then is replanned. So our aims are basically simple. Understand the person behind the illness and work in partnership so they have better control of their lives. Our aims are also to greatly improve that quality of life for the individual, empower patients with knowledge and confidence, help patients overcome anxieties and fears through positive thinking, provide expert guidance, and provide psychological and emotional support. Our services before, as I mentioned, the telephone helpline, drop-in. We introduced a new project 18 months ago, and that is called Reach Out Project. And these are patients who, either due to the nature of their illness or due to their ongoing medical intervention, do not feel well enough to come into the centre for therapy. A nurse will then go out to them if that is the patient's wish. And that entitles them to a bit of community, continuity of care, so they're not losing out. We provide a lot of support services. We provide counselling, psychotherapy, range of complementary therapies. And I'd like to say it's not about the complementary therapies. It's not about reflexology. It's not about aromatherapy. There's a common denominator runs through every therapy, and that is it gives patients permission to talk and permission to talk about their fears and anxieties, which is very important. We do food intolerance testing. Our nurses are all qualified in it because it seems a bit crazy to do nutritional awareness training. If the patient has an intolerance to a food, we need to find out so we can make sure they get the correct advice. We run patients and partners training, and that includes aromatherapy, and one of the nurses here who does it. Because again, it gives the relative something to do when they go home that they feel not quite so helpless. And now we do have an international reputation. When the charity was set up, it was set up for the people of Wirral. That no longer applies, and it hasn't applied for a long time. And basically, we have patients now from Canada, Australia, mainland Greece, Cyprus, Germany, Poland, France, Isle of Man, and right across the UK. And that is where we're at now. So you can find us on the web. And this is our new web. We've got a new one. It looks fantastic. It shows all our premises. You get us on Facebook, you get us on Twitter, and there's our email address. Well, I hope that helps you if you decide to set up a charity. We are a provider to the NHS. We have fought hard for it. And last year, our contacts were 12,000. Thank you.